So when you hear the word ladyboy, what comes to mind?
Well, for a lot of people, it probably conjures up images, maybe tied to exotic nightlife.
Yeah, exactly. Things you might hear whispered in like travel documentaries about Thailand.
Right. It's a term that's definitely widely used.
But, and this is the interesting part, it's actually a surprisingly recent English invention. It really only scratches the surface.
hmm And it often kind of obscures a much, much richer, older, and frankly, deeply complex cultural history.
Okay, so there's more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, absolutely. Because long before that term, Ladyboy even existed, and certainly before the whole modern tourism scene, Thailand had its own word, Kathoey. It's pronounced roughly Kari.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah. And this single term, it unlocks centuries of history, religious beliefs, and a concept of gender that profoundly challenges the rigid binaries we often just take for granted in the West.
So this deep dive today, it's really about getting into the true story of Thailand's Kathoey.
Exactly. Understanding their undeniable, significant place in society, a place that was, recognized and even revered for centuries.
Okay, so our mission here is to peel back those layers then, move beyond that kind of superficial label, ladyboy,
Right.
and uncover the nuanced reality behind these identities using the sources we've looked at.
And it's fascinating, isn't it, how language doesn't just describe a culture.
It shapes it.
It actively shapes how the world sees it, and how that perception can be, well, worlds apart from the lived experience.
Let's start with the vocabulary itself then, because you're saying the difference between these two words is really key.
It's crucial, yeah. The term ladyboy, it's unequivocally an English creation, no doubt about it.
Okay, where did it likely come from?
Well, the thinking is it probably emerged sometime during the post-World War II tourism boom. It was sort of a simplistic label, crafted maybe to help foreign visitors categorize what was, to them, a complex local identity.
And in trying to simplify, it just erased things.
Exactly. It raised so much of the underlying nuance.
Okay, so that's ladyboy. What about the Thai term, Kathoey? You said it's much older.
Much older. It has ancient roots, possibly predating even the Thai language itself, maybe from Khmer. And for centuries, it's served as this, like, broad umbrella term.
An umbrella for who, specifically?
Well, encompassing individuals we might now categorize using different terms like transgender women, maybe effeminate gay men, or even intersex individuals, essentially anyone who didn't fit neatly into those conventional male or female boxes.
Right.
And what's really illuminating here is that traditional Thai society viewed Kathoey not as some kind of anomaly, but as a distinct third gender.
A third gender, wow.
Yeah, a recognized state of being.
Right.
Right alongside Fuchai, that's man infusing woman.
So it tells us that gender fluidity wasn't just, like, tolerated, it was woven into the cultural fabric.
Deeply woven, not seen as an exception at all.
That recognition as a third gender, that's just so different from how things were historically in the West.
Completely different.
But, okay, let's bring it to modern Thailand. Does the term Kathoey still carry that same weight for everyone today?
Ah, that's a really critical question. Because it's complicated now.
How so?
Well, while for some, Kathoey absolutely maintains its historical significance, its cultural pride, for others, particularly many contemporary Thai transgender women, they find it outdated, or even sometimes derogatory,
Derogatory. Why?
because it can carry this implication that they aren't real women, that there's something separate.
I see. So what terms might they prefer now?
Well, this is why a growing number prefer to identify simply as Phaying, which just means woman, or sometimes Phaying Prophet Song. That translates roughly to a second kind of woman.
Okay, so they're directly asserting their female identity.
Exactly.
Right.
Rejecting that idea being put in a separate category altogether.
And if we tie this back to the Ladyboy label, what's the takeaway?
The insight here is pretty stark, actually. Ladyboy is it's a purely foreign construct.
Made for outsiders.
Precisely. It reflects the observer's need for an easy category, far more than it reflects the intricate lived reality of the people it tries to describe.
A simplification for the foreign gaze.
Yeah, a reduction, really, not an understanding.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and journey back in time, because you mentioned this isn't a modern thing.
Not at all. The presence of gender-diverse individuals in Southeast Asia,
Yeah.
it's certainly not a new phenomenon.
Our sources show this pretty clearly, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're woven into the very fabric of the region's history. We have records, folklore from Thailand, back when it was known as Siam, that describe people transcending traditional gender roles as early as the 14th century.
The 14th century. And crucially, this wasn't seen as like a sin or a crime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not seen as a transgression the way it often was historically in the West. It was viewed more as just a natural, accepted part of society.
How is that possible? What allowed for that
A
acceptance?
lot of it seems rooted in Theravada Buddhism, the prevailing religion there.
Okay. How did Buddhism play into it?
Well, in some traditional beliefs, being born Kathoey was often understood through the lens of karma.
Karma, like past lives affecting the present.
Exactly. The idea that one's past life deeds shaped their current existence. And this perspective, it tended to foster empathy, not condemnation.
So it was seen as destiny, maybe, not a punishable choice.
Precisely. And this kind of openness, this view rooted in karma, allowed for a fluidity that really contrasts sharply with the more rigid, often binary interpretations you find in, say, Western Abrahamic traditions.
Where gender variance was often, pathologized or outright condemned.
Right. A very different starting point.
So there was this cultural, maybe even spiritual framework for acceptance. Were there specific roles Kathoey played in ancient Siamese society? Anything surprising?
Oh, absolutely. In some folk traditions, Kathoey were actually revered.
Revered. How so?
They were believed by some to embody this unique spiritual balance, a blend of masculine and feminine energies. And this was thought to grant them a special connection to the spirit world.
Wow. That's a world away from the hypersexualized ladyboy stereotype we see today.
Completely. And beyond the spiritual side, they play really significant parts in things like traditional Thai theater, even in the royal courts.
Really? Like what?
Well, for instance, in classical dance dramas, think Khan or Lakan male performers very frequently portrayed the female roles. And they weren't just filling in. They were celebrated for their grace, their skill, their ability to embody femininity.
So this history, it really underscores that Kathoey weren't just like grudgingly tolerated.
Not at all. They were integral, celebrated contributors to Siamese culture for centuries,
Right.
long, long before Western influence started to change the picture.
Okay, so we've established this long integrated history, but then, as you said, things shifted.
Dramatically shifted, yeah.
The 19th century, Western colonial powers arrive in Southeast Asia.
Right. And they brought with them their own ideas, specifically these very rigid Victorian-era norms about gender and sexuality.
Which were very binary, male, female, and that's it.
Exactly. And these ideals were basically on a collision course with Thailand's much more fluid traditional understanding of gender.
What were the consequences of that collision?
They were profound. Western-style legal systems started getting introduced, and these systems, they began to criminalize things like homosexuality, which, remember, hadn't really been a major legal issue in traditional Thai society before.
So laws changed.
Laws changed, and this continued until, believe it or not, 1956. This imposition introduced totally new layers of stigma, legal challenges.
It sounds like this external influence, this import of Western law and thought, it fundamentally reshaped how Thai society viewed something that had existed for centuries.
It really did. It tried to force this complex reality into a binary framework it just wasn't designed for.
A stark example of that cultural imposition. And then fast forward a bit, post-World War II, this is when the term ladyboy really starts to gain traction.
That seems to be the period, yes.
Yeah.
Thailand rapidly became a major tourist destination after the war.
Then ladyboy emerged them.
It seems so. Almost functioning like a marketing tool in a way.
Marketing.
Yeah, a simplistic label for this deeply complex identity, but one that was kind of tailored for curious foreigners, people who just lack the cultural context for Kathoey.
And this tied into the visibility in places like Bangkok.
Absolutely. The increasing visibility of Kathoey, especially in the nightlife districts of Bangkok, Pattaya, that became part of Thailand's global image. You had these cabaret shows, right? Featuring stunning Kathoey performers. They became tourist staples.
And that cemented the ladyboy label within the tourism industry.
Pretty much, yeah.
So you end up with this strange paradox. On one hand, tourism offered economic opportunities, maybe for Kathoey facing job discrimination elsewhere.
Right, which was a real issue.
But at the same time, it often reduced their whole identity down to a spectacle, like an exotic commodity for tourists.
Exactly. This commercialization, it effectively flattened this profound cultural identity into a really one-dimensional stereotype.
A stereotype that sadly still persists today.
It really does. So the word ladyboy, it doesn't just describe this shift from Kathoey. It kind of symbolizes it.
It's the Western lens.
Yeah, a lens that simplifies and ultimately misunderstands a deep Thai reality.
Okay, let's fast forward now to today. Because if you visit Thai cities, the visibility of Kathoey can be really striking.
It absolutely can. They're prominent cultural icons in areas like entertainment, fashion, beauty.
You have huge events like the Miss Tiffany's Universe pageant. That's a major televised event, right? For
Perfect.
what, transgender women?
It is a huge deal. And you see Kathoey excelling as models, singers, actors, social media influencers with, millions of followers.
And this high visibility, it's often pointed to by outsiders, by tourists, as proof of Thailand's amazing tolerance.
That's the common perception.
There's a but.
There's a significant but. That visibility, it's really only half the truth. What looks like full acceptance to outsiders is very often described by activists on the ground as more like tolerance without acceptance.
Tolerance without acceptance, what does that mean in practice?
Well, it means that despite there being, clearly less overt hostility than you might see in many other countries, that visibility doesn't automatically translate into full legal rights or protections.
Like what kind of rights?
Okay, prime example. A Kathoey cannot legally change her gender on official documents. Think ID cards, passports.
Still, even now?
Still. And this leads to constant daily challenges in basic things like opening a bank account, getting certain jobs, dealing with the police, accessing health care.
So the key difference is between being sort of socially visible or tolerated and having actual legal recognition.
Precisely. Social tolerance allows you to be present in public, maybe celebrated in some spheres, but true legal recognition that grants fundamental human rights and equal access across the board.
And beyond just the legal status on paper, what about day-to-day barriers? Are they still significant?
Oh, definitely. Workplace discrimination is still a major hurdle.
Even though they're so prominent in entertainment.
Yes. While they are undeniably prominent in fields like entertainment, beauty, hospitality, many Kathoey are still systematically excluded from other industries. Less glamorous ones, perhaps. And then there's the issue of the mandatory military draft.
Right. For anyone assigned male at birth, how does that play out?
It can be incredibly humiliating. Trans women sometimes face mockery, or they're labeled as having a mental disorder just to get an exemption.
That sounds awful. Is there any progress being made on these fronts?
There is some progress, yes. It's important to acknowledge that. The 2015 Gender Equality Act, for instance, does offer some anti-discrimination protections. That was a step.
And didn't Thailand recently legalize same-sex marriage?
Yes. Huge news. Legalization is set for January 2025, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
A historic first for Southeast Asia. That's definitely major progress for LGBTQ plus rights overall.
But connecting it back to Kathoey specifically.
Right. Even with that progress, a distinct third gender category remains largely unrecognized in law. And full legal gender recognition changing those ID cards, that's still elusive.
So that tourist-friendly image of tolerance.
It often masks this more complex reality. A reality of persistent legal hurdles, social stigma in many areas. Modern Kathoey are really navigating this delicate balance, between being culturally celebrated in some ways and systemically excluded in others.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, for our listener?
Well, I think this whole journey from the ancient, spiritually recognized Kathoey to the modern, often misunderstood Ladyboy stereotype, it's just such a powerful story.
About language, definitely.
About language, about power dynamics, about what happens when cultures collide.
It's a potent reminder, isn't it, that words are never just words.
Never. They carry immense history. They have the power to illuminate truth, or tragically to erase it.
And understanding that difference between Kathoey and Ladyboy, it feels like more than just, a language lesson.
Oh, much more. It's really a call for respect, I think. A call to look beyond those easy, often harmful stereotypes, and to recognize the rich, complex humanity that exists behind the labels.
The power of a single word, especially one imposed from the outside, to distort centuries of history. It's quite staggering when you think about it.
It really is.
So the final verdict on Ladyboy, the truth behind it.
Well, the truth is, it's not just the wrong word. It's a profound misdirection. A distortion, really.
A footnote.
Yeah, a brief, misleading footnote in a far, far grander story. The real narrative here is about the Kathoey, a community with centuries of history, a unique spiritual role in some traditions, and an absolutely vital place in Thai culture.
An identity that wasn't imported, wasn't crafted for tourists.
Exactly. It's deeply, deeply rooted in Southeast Asia's own soil.
And despite everything, the modern world's attempts to simplify, to commodify that Kathoey spirit endures.
It absolutely does. It's a powerful testament to resilience, to authenticity.
And maybe a profound reminder that identity ultimately isn't defined by outsiders.
It's defined by those who live it day in and day out. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
What else?
Yeah. What other nuanced truths, what other rich histories might be hidden behind simplistic labels that we apply, maybe unthinkingly, to other cultures around the world?